Imagine, if you will, an image so ancient it predates our words, a symbol so primal it reaches beyond the scriptures or prayers, rooted deep in the psyche. That image I call the God image, not a figure I invented, not a creed I uphold, but a phenomenon that appears unbidden, an echo of wholeness, stirring from the unconscious. Whether you call it deity or archetype, it is no mere myth, but a living presence within the human soul. When we speak of the divine, we often imagine a presence external to ourselves, dwelling beyond the heavens, watching over creation. Yet if one observes carefully, it soon becomes evident that what we call God is first and foremost an image arising in the human soul. It is not constructed by reason nor invented by culture. It emerges spontaneously, as if from an inner depth far older than our conscious mind. This image is archetypal, a primordial form that has accompanied humanity from its earliest dawn, recurring in myth, dream, and vision. It is not bound to one tradition or doctrine, for it is not the possession of any creed. Rather, it is an innate psychic phenomenon, a symbol that appears when the human being approaches the limits of his understanding and feels the weight of the infinite. This image reflects the totality of the psyche. It is as though the unconscious, in striving for wholeness, projects itself in a figure that represents both the origin and goal of existence. Such an image cannot be dismissed as mere illusion. Illusions fade when confronted by reality, but this figure persists across centuries among all peoples in countless forms. It rises in the dreams of the simple villager and in the visions of the mystic sage alike. One may interpret it as a god, another as a symbol, yet its psychological truth remains the same. It is the archetype of wholeness, the self-speaking in symbolic language. In this sense, the divine image is not a being that commands belief, but a psychic fact that demands recognition. To ignore it is to cut oneself off from the deepest layers of one's own nature. For whenever man believes he has outgrown the gods, he falls prey to other powers, ideologies, obsessions, the idols of reason or progress, that claim sovereignty over his soul. The archetype cannot be abolished, it can only be transformed. Suppressed, it appears in distorted forms. Acknowledged, it becomes a guiding presence, drawing consciousness toward integration. The image is paradoxical, containing light and shadow, good and evil, creation and destruction. It reflects the wholeness of the psyche itself, which is never one-sided. To confront it is to confront not only what uplifts us, but also what terrifies us. Yet in embracing this paradox, a human being moves toward completeness, for the self, which the divine image represents, does not seek perfection in the narrow sense of moral purity, but wholeness, the union of opposites, the reconciliation of what has been split apart. In this lies its numinous power. It is not a concept one can control, but an experience that overwhelms, fascinates, and transforms. Thus, when one speaks of the divine, one must recognize that it is both within and beyond. As archetype, it lives in the depths of the unconscious. As symbol, it reveals itself in visions and myths. As reality, it guides the individual toward that mysterious state where he becomes most truly himself. Whether one names it God or self, it remains the most profound expression of the psyche striving toward its own totality. To speak of the divine as mere belief is to diminish its reality. Belief belongs to opinion, to things uncertain, to that which one hopes but does not know. Yet the experience of the divine is not a matter of belief, it is an event of the psyche. It is not something one assents to because a creed demands it, but something one knows because it happens. When the numinous breaks into consciousness, it comes with the weight of certainty, a force that shatters the walls of rational doubt. One can argue about doctrines endlessly, but the direct encounter with the divine needs no argument. It is as undeniable as a storm, as overwhelming as love, as irrefutable as suffering. One does not need to believe in the thunder, one only needs to hear it. This experience arises in many ways. For some it appears in dreams, where the unconscious communicates in symbols that carry a sacred quality. For others it arrives through synchronicity, moments when inner meaning and outer event coincide with uncanny precision. giving the sense that life is not random but woven into a deeper pattern. Still others encounter it in sudden intuitions, in the silence of meditation, in the mystery of nature, or in the creative act. In such moments, the divine ceases to be an abstract proposition and becomes an immediate reality, experienced as presence, power, and meaning. What is encountered in these moments is not always gentle. The divine is not a projection of human ideals. It encompasses both light and shadow. Its touch can inspire ecstasy, but it can also confront us with fear and trembling. One may feel uplifted to the heights of vision, yet also cast into the abyss of one's own limitations. It is precisely this paradox that gives the experience its truth. Were it only a projection of our wishes, it would flatter us, comfort us, and leave us unchanged, but the genuine encounter with the divine disrupts, demands, and transforms. It compels the individual to see beyond the smallness of ego and to reckon with something greater than himself. The distinction, then, is this: belief can be adopted or abandoned at will, but knowledge born of experience cannot be dismissed. A person who has seen lightning cannot be persuaded that it does not exist. Likewise, one who has truly experienced the divine does not stand upon belief but upon certainty. This certainty is not intellectual, not provable by rational means, but it is existential. It shapes the whole of life, just as the memory of fire forever changes one who has been burned. Thus the divine is not a matter of debating existence, but of recognizing an inner reality as compelling as any outer fact. It is not the province of dogma, though religions have clothed it in many garments. At its core, it is the psyche's encounter with the numinous, that overwhelming otherness that reveals to us that we are not alone in the universe, nor are we masters of our own depths. It is a knowledge that does not rest upon belief, but upon the undeniable fact of having been touched by mystery. God is not a hypothesis to be proven, nor a dogma to be accepted, but a reality to be known. I said once, I do not need to believe, I know, and I meant it, for I have sensed that something within me moved, spoke, revealed itself, not as an invention of reason, but as a numinous fact, in dreams, in synchronistic moments, in the silent guidance of music and art. I have known him. This God-image is no divine ontological entity separate from our psyche. Rather, it coincides with the archetype of the self, our unconscious striving toward wholeness. It is neither wholly personal nor impersonal, ethical nor unethical. It encompasses all. Its paradox is the paradox of the psyche itself within the psychic landscape. The God archetype plays a sacred role. It calls forth the integration of opposites, conscious and unconscious, good and evil, masculine and feminine. It beckons us toward individuation, the realization of the one and the many, the small self and the big self in union. The gods did not vanish from Olympus. They slipped into the shadows of our unconscious. Their energies now surface in new guises, in our culture, in our neuroses, in our modern obsessions. To understand them is to understand not myth, but the very currents within our own souls. When the image of the divine rises before us, it does not appear merely as a symbol of power or authority. It emerges as a union, a bringing together of all that is divided in the human soul. The figure is paradoxical, at once light and dark, loving and destructive, personal and impersonal. It gathers into itself the opposites that tear the individual apart, and in this way it becomes the highest expression of psychic wholeness. The divine image points not to perfection in a narrow moral sense, but to completeness, where nothing of the human condition is denied or excluded. The psyche is not a simple harmony, but a field of opposites. Consciousness struggles against unconsciousness, good stands opposed to evil, instinct contends with reason, and the masculine seeks balance with the feminine. If one side dominates, the other is driven into shadow, where it festers and distorts. The human being then becomes divided against himself, but within the unconscious there arises an image that seeks to reconcile what has been sundered. The divine, as symbol, gathers the opposites into a unity that cannot be conceived rationally, yet can be felt with unmistakable force. This process is not comfortable. To encounter the divine as symbol of integration means confronting not only what uplifts us, but also what terrifies us. It demands that we face the shadow, the denied aspects of our nature, and bring them into relation with the conscious self. Only then can wholeness emerge. The image of the divine, appearing in dreams, myths, and visions, shows us that what is feared must not be destroyed, but integrated, for it too belongs to the totality of our being. Thus the divine image becomes the model of the self, a union of opposites, a pattern of completeness that guides the individual toward individuation. Religions have long intuited this truth, even if unconsciously. Myths of dying and resurrected gods, of divine figures uniting heaven and earth, of saviors embodying both human frailty and divine glory, all point to the archetypal drama of integration. These images are not arbitrary inventions, they are psychic necessities, expressions of the deepest movement within the soul. They reveal that the way to wholeness is not through denial or repression, but through reconciliation. To live without this symbol is to remain torn in conflict, caught between opposing forces that exhaust and fragment the individual. But to live with it, to let the divine image work upon the soul, is to move slowly toward balance. It is a long and often painful path, for one must surrender the illusion of purity and embrace the reality of contradiction. Yet only through this surrender does one become whole. Thus the divine stands before us not as an external ruler demanding worship, but as an inner reality pointing the way toward integration. It calls us to accept the paradox of our existence, to unite what has been divided, and to realize within ourselves the greater pattern of the self. In this way, the divine becomes not only a symbol, but the very path by which we come to know who we truly are. The gods of old did not die, they changed their dwelling place. Once they walked upon Olympus, thundered in the heavens, and ruled from their temples. Now they have descended into the inner world of man, where they live on as psychic powers, disguised yet ever present. When people say the gods have vanished, what they mean is that their images no longer dominate the collective imagination. But the psychic energies they embodied have not disappeared, they have retreated into the unconscious, waiting to manifest in new and often unexpected forms. This disappearance is not without consequence. When a god no longer has a name, it does not cease to exist. It reappears in symptoms, obsessions, and collective manias. The energy once devoted to ritual and myth now bursts forth in other guises, in political ideologies, in the worship of progress, in the restless pursuit of possessions, in the destructive power of mass movements. Where the god is unrecognized, it acts blindly, seizing the individual without his awareness. What was once a sacred figure is transformed into an unconscious compulsion, often with catastrophic results. Yet within this disappearance lies a possibility for transformation, for when the gods recede from their outer forms, they invite us to seek them within. No longer can we find them only in temples or dogmas. We must discover them in dreams, in visions, in the depths of our own being. This is not the death of the divine, but its interiorization. What once was projected onto the heavens now confronts us as inner reality. It is both more intimate and more demanding, for one can no longer hand over responsibility to external rites. One must undergo the encounter personally, in the solitude of the soul. This transformation is part of the great drama of psychic development. The withdrawal of the gods from outer existence forces the individual to recognize the archetypal powers that live within. It is a painful process, for the loss of outer certainties leaves one exposed to emptiness, doubt, and despair. Yet it is precisely in this emptiness that the possibility of renewal emerges. The psyche, deprived of external gods, seeks their images inwardly, and in doing so begins the work of individuation. The divine becomes not merely a cultural inheritance, but a living, personal reality. To recognize the gods within is not to reduce them to mere psychology. On the contrary, it is to acknowledge their continuing vitality. Their forms may change, but their energies remain eternal. They are the deep patterns of the human soul, the archetypal currents that shape imagination, behavior, and destiny. Whether we call them gods, archetypes, or symbols, their power over us is undeniable. Thus the disappearance of the gods from the outer world is not an end but a metamorphosis. They challenge us to find them again, not as distant rulers but as inner forces demanding consciousness. If we accept this challenge, we do not lose the divine. We encounter it in a new form, one that binds us more deeply to the mystery of our own soul and to the unfolding transformation of humanity itself. So I ask you, the listeners and seekers, have they ever truly vanished, or do they await, deep within, in dreams and symbols, calling us gently towards something greater, not as distant deities asking for belief, but as inner truths guiding us toward consciousness and wholeness? Real, not because they are true in the material sense, but because they are experiences of the psyche discovering itself. And in that discovery, the realest of all transformations occurs